here has heard about drawdown before? Anyone? Super. But for those of you in the room who don't know what drawdown actually means, let me give you a definition, because it's a word that's used for lots of different things for lots of different people. But when we talk about climate, what drawdown means is that point in time when atmospheric concentrations of greenhouse gases begins to decline on a year-to-year basis. It's that point when we take out more greenhouse gases than we put in to Earth's atmosphere. But more than just a technical definition, drawdown is really a new way of thinking about and acting on global warming. It's that marker on the horizon pointing us towards a future that we actually want, a future where reversing global warming is possible. Now, we're all concerned about climate change, and we should be. It is the most significant challenge that humanity has ever faced, and it is affecting us today. It's affecting our children tomorrow, our grandchildren tomorrow after tomorrow, and it's in future generations will feel the effects of climate change. It impacts our weather, it impacts our oceans, our atmosphere, the air that we breathe, our terrestrial systems, biodiversity, and human economy and societies. So how do we actually solve this problem? The only way we know how is to draw down, to avoid putting greenhouse gases up, and to pull down what's already there. The only way we can solve this is by stopping and beginning to reverse global warming. Now, I know this might sound daunting, perhaps even impossible, but humanity is brilliant. It took me a while to figure that out, but as I went through all of this research with my team, I realized that we have real workable technologies and practices that exist today. I call them touchable solutions. These are technologies and practices that you can imagine going out and touching. You can imagine putting your hand on that solar panel or on that wind turbine. You can imagine walking through a protected forest. You can imagine that smile on a young girl's face as she completes 12 to 13 years of schooling. These are real solutions because they exist. They don't have to be made up. They don't have to imagine some new theory of change or some degrowth model. You can actually go out and touch these solutions. And taken together, these existing technologies and practices can achieve drawdown. What we lack is the will to move farther and faster than we ever thought possible. Now, part of the problem is the way we understand these solutions. The science behind these solutions is confusing, it is complex, often too distant for most people to act upon in their daily lives. And we're also inundated with stories of doom and gloom in the media. That's how we understand global warming, how we understand climate change. This is just an example. This is a picture of London. What's wrong here? This is not actually flooding. This is a photoshopped image crafted to elicit fear and panic. And when we're confronted with fear and panic, we run away. We distract ourselves with clickbait. For example, who wouldn't want to know how a frog ornament is used as a murder weapon? I would click on that. I would. And a lot of these stories come from good science. This is a story originally from the New York Times, but it's been rebranded, reframed to elicit panic and a sense of disempowerment. The apocalypse is upon you, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you might as well order some discounted wine and take away from Grubhub. Right? This is marketing, people. Right? We're marketing the problem. We're marketing fear. We're marketing conflict. And when we combine fear, problem, and conflict, this is a recipe, this is a cauldron for apathy, an indifference to the status quo. These are tools of oppression to maintain the business as usual. And we need to change that discourse to something completely different, to a discourse that focuses on solutions, possibility, and collaboration. Because it's within that mix, that recipe, that we have the opportunity to create the future that we want. That is how opportunity arises, when we combine solutions, the possibility of what they can achieve, and start working together. That's how change happens. Let us remember, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did not say, "I have a nightmare." He said, "I have a dream," right? Now, I work with a team of researchers from around the world. They come from many different backgrounds. From, yes, there are climate scientists, yes, that there are data scientists, but we're not just a bunch of data wonks. Trust me, we love our data, but they come from backgrounds in engineering, in architecture, forestry, agriculture, public policy, human rights, political science, the full gamut of different disciplines. They come together to do this work and research together because in order to understand the solution to the problem, we redefine how we actually evaluate these different technologies and practices and not simply focus on the data science and the climate science to understand the problem. We need to understand how we can actually take action to make transformation. And taken together, we've mapped, modeled, and detailed 100 solutions to stopping and beginning to reverse global warming. 80 of these technologies and practices already exist today. And taken together, those 80 can achieve drawdown. 20 are coming attractions. These are solutions on the pipeline. And when they come online, we'll accelerate our progress farther and faster. These are technologies and practices that do one or more of three things. Replace existing fossil fuel-based electricity generation with clean, renewable sources. To reduce consumption through technological efficiencies and behavior change. And to biosequester carbon in our plants' biomass and soils through a process we all learn about in secondary school. It's the miracle of photosynthesis. It's through a combination of these three mechanisms that drawdown becomes possible. So how do we get there? Well, here's the short answer. This is a list of 20 of the most substantive solutions, 20 of the 80 existing solutions. Now take a quick look at this list. It's really eclectic, so just go over it for a few seconds, and I'll explain more about it in a minute. You see a lot of different things on here, from refrigerant management to family planning, from solar panels to silvopasture. So let's break it down a little bit. To the right of the slide, you'll see figures that represent gigatons. That's a billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalents removed or avoided from entering Earth's atmosphere over a 30-year period from 2020 to 2050. Now, I say carbon dioxide equivalents because we evaluate the different emissions impacts of both carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases. We have to convert them to the carbon dioxide equivalent so that we can compare them as apples to apples to apples to apples. So the first thing to notice about this list is that when we often think about climate solutions, the first thing that typically comes to mind is renewable energy systems, right? And they're incredibly important. But the first thing to notice is that only 5 of these top 20 solutions relate to electricity. Now, it's not surprising because electricity only accounts for about 25% of the problem. But what surprised us, honestly, is that 8 of the top 20 solutions relate to food. Now, the climate impact of food may be a surprise to many people, but if we start to think about all the energy, all the emissions, all the work that is embodied in every grain that is produced, every drop of oil, from production to harvest, to processing, to packaging. Imagine all the cardboard, the glass, the plastic that's used to generate and store our food and transport that great distances in refrigerators that use refrigerants, which are a greenhouse gas, to when we turn on our stoves to cook that food, and sadly, all the methane that's produced when we waste too much of it. It becomes really clear that the decisions that we make every day are perhaps the most substantive decisions every single one of us can make to stopping and beginning to reverse global warming. And when we think about how we manage our land, it becomes also incredibly important. 4 of the top solutions. Now, by protecting our forests, wetlands, and currently degraded land, we safeguard, expand, and create new carbon sinks that directly draw down carbon every year, again, through that process of photosynthesis, which converts carbon dioxide into plants' biomass and soil organic carbon. This is how drawdown happens every year. And when we take land and food together, something really interesting kind of surfaces, right? 12 of the top 20 solutions relate directly to humanity's connection to the land. How and why we use land is perhaps the most substantive set of solutions to transform our future and to begin stopping and reversing global warming. This fundamentally changes traditional thinking on climate solutions. But to the top of the list, there's an interesting one, and I want to talk a little bit about that. Refrigerant management. Maybe many people might not know what that is. But refrigerant management refers to the management of leakage during the lifetime and the destruction at the end of lifetime of something called hydrofluorocarbons, refrigerant gases that are used by refrigerators and air conditioners across the world to cool the air. Now, we've done a great job with the Montreal Protocol to limit the production and use of chlorofluorocarbons and hydrochlorofluorocarbons, right? Because of the ozone layer, remember that? Landmark decision, the Montreal Protocol. But they were replaced by hydrofluorocarbons, which are hundreds to thousands of times more potent a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So we replaced one problem with another. But by properly managing that leakage and destroying of those hydrofluorocarbons, we can reduce or avoid up to 90 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalents. That's astounding, right? And if we were to actually incorporate a phase out of hydrofluorocarbons, like we did in the Montreal Protocol, and replace them with natural refrigerants, which exist today, we could also avoid up to 120 to nearly 200 gigatons from entering the atmosphere. Maybe you're surprised as we were. But I want to go down, I want to dive into some of the specific solutions so you can get more of a sense. Now, I can't go through all 80 solutions, it's too much. But I want to give you just a flavor of them. Now, first, there are many that we might expect to see. Wind turbines, for example, renewable energy systems, right? Offshore wind turbines, incredibly important set of solutions. And as I mentioned, renewable energy systems, very, very important. But we have to remember that these are not solutions that are solely in the purview of high-income urban environments, right? When we typically think of rooftop solar panels, for example, we may often go straight to that warehouse in Miami, for example, covered in solar panels, right? Or we might think about a nice house in a rich residential neighborhood in Berkeley, California that's got these beautiful solar panels. Very lovely. But we also have to remember that these are solutions that are applicable in high and low-income countries, in urban and rural environments. This is a family living on a straw island on Lake Titicaca installing their first solar panel. Before kerosene was used for cooking and lighting, think about that. Kerosene on a straw island. So by installing solar, this family is not only helping to reduce emissions, but providing abundant access to electricity for their family, which helps with schooling, which helps with their health and well-being. But they're also helping to providing safety and security for their household. These are a set of cascading benefits when we implement these solutions. We have to also think beyond just electricity, beyond just the coal-fired plants and the natural gas plants. We have to think about how we move around in the world today, right? This is electric bikes. There are many different choices that we have in our mobility options. Electric bikes. We have normal bikes, of course. We have electric bikes, we have normal bikes, we have mass transit options. And hey, how about walking, right? We still remember how to do that. And of course, in those situations where walking, public transport, biking, and the many other mobility options we have are not available, we can go for an electric vehicle instead of an internal combustion engine, which essentially combusts fossil fuels and emits those greenhouse gases directly into the atmosphere. This is an incredibly important solution that blends both individual action as well as our interactions with city and municipal scale decision making. We can support and incentivize the choice to implement these solutions by investing in infrastructure for bikes, for walkable cities, and so on. We also have these decisions that we make every day in our own households. We've heard about LEDs and their importance in reducing electricity consumption in our homes. Incredibly important. We also have to remember, again, these are solutions for both for high-income and urban environments, as well as really important solutions for the developing world, leapfrogging ahead into using solutions that are beneficial to rural environments, providing light in areas of darkness. Now, tropical forests tell their own story, right? By protecting currently degraded land in the tropics and allowing natural regrowth to occur, we can sequester up to 61 gigatons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. This is drawdown in action every year as carbon dioxide is, again, pulled from the atmosphere and stored in biomass. The same happens in temperate forest restoration. Same thing happens when we start to restore bamboo ecosystems and our wetlands and our peatlands. And it turns out that indigenous peoples are the best caretakers of our ecosystems, best caretakers of our biodiversity, of nature. And by providing the legal right to tenure on land that they currently are already managing, can protect and prevent illegal logging and encroachment of foresters into their traditional lands, and can reduce up to 7 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent from entering the atmosphere. We also have to think about how we produce our food to make it more regenerative in nature. Now, this is regenerative annual cropping. And there are a number of different regenerative solutions that we profile and draw down. But when we refer to this, we're referring to a combination of different practices like no tillage or reduced tillage, cover cropping, crop rotation, compost or manure application to cropland, and a set of organic practices. When taken together, they have this regenerative effect. But what's interesting here is there's nothing new here. There's nothing that needs to be invented. These are solutions and practices that have been used to produce food for generations, for millennia. In fact, smallholders farmers around the world still practice regenerative forms of agriculture. Indigenous peoples still practice regenerative forms of agriculture. But they are increasingly being replaced by modern industrial agriculture, which focuses on monoculture, monocropping, tillage, which churns the soil and releases that stored soil organic carbon into the atmosphere, and the use of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. And the combination of these practices degrades and destroys the soil and turns it into a net emitter of carbon dioxide. Regenerative annual cropping and other regenerative forms of agriculture has the opposite effect, right? It restores soil health and productivity, improves water retention, increases yield. It benefits smallholder farmers and large farming operations alike, and brings carbon back to the land. It's a win-win-win-win-win set of solutions. And it's not just what we produce, but what we consume that is incredibly important. A plant-rich diet is not a vegan or a vegetarian diet, though I applaud any who make these life choices. It's a healthy diet in terms of how much we consume, and particularly how much meat is consumed. In high-income countries like we are in today, we vastly overconsume everything, and I mean literally everything, not just food. We vastly overconsume everything, and that needs to be reduced, but particularly meat. And meat is a very high energy intensive commodity, high emissions commodity, and by over-consuming this, we are actually producing a tremendous amount. But in low-income countries, the exact opposite is happening. Low-income countries show an insufficient caloric and protein intake, and that needs rebalancing to a healthy diet. And it's actually in that rebalancing that a plant-rich diet can avoid up to 66 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalents from entering the atmosphere. It's really astounding. Moreover, approximately a third of all food is not even eaten. That's shocking. Shocking. When 800 million people in the world today are going hungry, we waste about a third of all food. And this accounts for about 8% of global greenhouse gases. We need to think about where along the supply chain this loss and wastage is actually occurring. In low-income countries, after food leaves the farm, most food is wasted early in the supply chain. All right? Due to processing and packaging, storage, and infrastructure challenges. It's not wasted at the end by consumers who struggle to feed in countries that struggle to feed their populations, right? In high-income countries, the exact opposite happens. After food leaves the farm, most food is wasted at the end of the supply chain by consumers and markets. Markets stocking up their stores in order to meet consumer demand. This is a consumer choice problem, not a technology issue. And when that food and loss ends up entering into the waste stream, where it goes into landfills and decomposes, and it produces a gas called methane. Now, methane is about 36 times more potent a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide on a 100-year timescale. On a 20-year timescale, which methane has a very high impact in the short term, it's about 86 to 100 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So by reducing our food waste, preventing food waste from the start, we can avoid up to 70 gigatons from entering the atmosphere. Now here's something that's really interesting. Everything that we do at Drawdown is based on a systems approach. So we have to think about how all these different solutions are integrated together. So we avoid double counting, we ensure market allocation and land allocation, and to deal with system interactions. And we have to remember that all of these solutions operate as a system within systems, right? We heard a little about that earlier in the panel today. As just an example of how this works, when we integrate the food system together, and we implement all of those regenerative agricultural practices, and we reduce our food waste, and we adopt a plant-rich diet, our research shows that we would produce enough food on current farmland to feed the world's population now until 2050 and beyond. What does that mean? That means as a systemic solution, we don't need to cut down any forests for food production. We don't need to. The solutions to reversing global warming are the same solutions to food insecurity and the same solutions to deforestation. These are win-win-win solutions. Now, a solution that often doesn't get talked enough about, and really should, family planning. By providing the basic human right to choose when, how, and if to raise a family, by providing equal access to reproductive health clinics, contraception, and freedom of choice devoid of persecution, can result in a lower estimated population by 2050. Now that lower population means reduced everything. Reduced energy, reduced buildings, reduced transportation, food. All the energy and all the emissions that are used to supply that increased demand from that higher population are reduced by providing the basic human right to choose when, how, and if to raise a family. But family planning can't happen without universal quality and access to education to girls and boys that are currently being denied access. Studies show that when girls and boys have access to 12 to 13 years of schooling, they have dramatically different life trajectories, right? Increased economic activity, delayed onset of marriage, smaller family size, improved livelihoods and well-being. It's a win-win set of win-win solutions of cascading benefits. And what that results in is ultimately a reduced population over time at the global scale. Now, the impact of universal education and family planning are so inextricably intertwined, right? You can't really disaggregate one from the other too neatly. And so we chose to cut the results right down the middle. But the point here is that addressing systemic gender inequity is an essential solution across the system that results in a cascading series of benefits to humans and to the planet, and has this effect of reducing overall consumption patterns. Now, With all that said, who here believes that drawdown is possible? All right, we've got a few. Well, let me tell you, it is possible. All right, we can achieve drawdown. We have the solutions at hand. We can achieve drawdown by, say, 2070 using the numbers I just showed you. It's a tall order. This is our most conservative scenario. If we're more ambitious, we're faster, we can achieve drawdown even sooner than that, by 2050. You'll notice that the rankings all change. If we're even more ambitious and faster and move faster and farther than we even thought possible, we can achieve drawdown even sooner. Again, the rankings change. And the point here is that the rankings don't matter. They only represent the impacts of a set of solutions based on whatever scenarios that we decide are plausible, that are realistic, that we can achieve over time. But the point is, we need all of these solutions in order to achieve drawdown. We need all 80 existing technologies to achieve them, and we need to move farther and faster than we ever thought we needed to. The top 20 aren't going to do it. The top 40 aren't going to do it. The top 60 aren't going to do it. There's no such thing as a small solution. But taken together, what this actually shows is a system of solutions, and ultimately a system transformation. The good news about all of this is that we want these solutions whether or not global warming was even a problem. Because as I said many times today, they all have cascading benefits to human and planetary well-being. If we take renewable energy, this results in clean, abundant access to electricity for all. It reduces air pollution. It provides better educational and economic attainment for those people in need. When we think about a plant-rich diet or reduce food waste, this results in enough food and sustenance to feed the world a nutrient-rich diet now until 2050 and beyond, including increased population change. Family planning and educating girls, this is about human rights. It's about economic prosperity. It's about gender equality. It's about universal access and freedom. It's about justice. Regenerative agriculture, tropical tree staple crops, silvopasture, restores carbon to the land, benefits smallholder farmers and large farming operations, improves soil productivity, restores the natural carbon cycle, and brings carbon back to the land. Protecting our ecosystems also protects biodiversity and protects and safeguards nature and our natural resources. Its tangible benefits to all species is truly beyond calculation. So when we actually adopt this system of solutions, we achieve things like the Sustainable Development Goals. They become attainable when we shift the system to a set of solutions that address climate, address all the other factors, all the other key indicators and metrics of human and planetary well-being defined in the Sustainable Development Goals. And for those of you who are profit-oriented, I'm not. I've always worked for a nonprofit my whole life, so I don't really understand profits, for-profit companies. Some of you in here, you can teach me. But for those of you who are interested in profit, we've done the math on our financial cash flows. And this is going to cost us, this system of solutions will cost humanity about $29 trillion over 30 years, more than what we would have to spend anyway. That's just more than we would have to spend anyway. Now that sounds like a lot, doesn't it? $29 trillion? That's about $1 trillion a year over 30 years for the whole world. And if we consider global GDP is well over $80 trillion every year now, we start to realize that this is a small percentage in that investment, for an investment in our future. But even more so, when we calculate the savings, the net operational savings over the same time period, this results in about $74 trillion in savings. That's over double the cost. A return on investment that's about a net benefit of $44 trillion by implementing a system of solutions and creating the future that we actually want. This should make everybody who is interested in profit smile. Because we can achieve this, and it's not really going to cost us all that much. Indeed, the financial return alone is worth doing it. But when we start to think about all of those cascading benefits to human and planetary well-being, it should just make sense. It's not costing a lot. There's a huge return on that benefit. It's beyond calculation to even conceive of what that monetary return on that investment is. It's impossible. Think about our planet and our species, humanity, benefiting everyone. It should be not a win-win for some, but a win-win for all. And one more thing before I leave you. The really exciting thing about this system of solutions is that when we implement them as a whole and take that plunge into investing into our future now and do it fast and ambitiously, we shift the system itself. We move from a way of doing business that is inherently exploitative and extractive. We shift that system to something new, a new normal that's by nature restorative and regenerative. We need to totally rethink our global goals, to move beyond stabilization, because frankly, stabilization doesn't make sense. We even need to move beyond sustainability. We can achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. That's great. But we need to think beyond 2030. We need to embed into the fabric of our economy and the fabric of our society the ideals, the realities of social justice, equity, and human rights and well-being as a thread through the entire system. So we move beyond sustainability towards regeneration. And along the way, we can reverse global warming. Thank you.